Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Kardec Radio, where we nourish our souls 24/7 with Spiritist teachings that are so eye-opening, so heart-opening, so mind-aligning, so consoling and beautiful and educational. And we know from Emmanuel that it is through knowledge and our moral transformation, namely love and charity, that we draw closer to God. And today we will go back to our study of the book Genesis. We're finding ourselves in the second half of the chapter, The Time Has Come, which we find in chapter 18 in Genesis. And today, as we are doing the second half of this chapter, we will turn to page 417, and it is item 9. And before we begin, I will share the screen. So let's see how this works. And then we're also going to check technology to make sure that we're appearing correctly, because at this moment I'm not seeing you guys anymore. And welcome, by the way, welcome to everyone who is here today joining in to this lovely study that we are embarking on. So I'm not, hold on just a second here. See what's going on. Yes. Now let us see. This is lagging behind a little bit. We see that we are sharing. Yep, it looks good. All right, so let's get started. Chapter 18, items 9 through 19, and we're starting, of course, with item 9. So this is all about the time has come as Jesus predicted. And we certainly feel this chapter was written for us right now. But we also know that this book was written 150, 160 years ago, and that other generations before us most likely felt like we do today. So humankind is being transformed, just as it has been transformed in other epochs. And each transformation is marked by a turning point, which for the human species is what the turning point in growth is for the individual. These crises, frequently painful and dolorous, carry generations and institutions along with them, but are always followed by a phase of material and moral progress. There's always hope. This too shall pass. And these are necessary trials and tribulations that we encounter, endure, and go through. So humankind is being transformed, and we can attest to that. And we know that each transformation marks a turning point. And we feel it. We feel it right now, right? It started obviously last year. Of course, it was going on all along, but it became more apparent last year with the appearance of COVID-19. These crises are often painful, and we can attest to that as well. And they're carrying generations and institutions along with them. Everything gets transformed. And the interesting thing is what's coming now. One thing that might seem strange to you, but which nevertheless is strictly true, let's take note of that, is that the spirit world that surrounds you, us, feels the repercussions of all the turmoil that disturbs the world of incarnates. I would even say that it plays an active part. So at this moment, we would like to mention that this item is written by a Dr. Barry, Barry. Dr. Barry wrote this, and so he is saying that I would even say that it plays an active part. Is not we are saying that, it's Dr. Barry who is saying it. So what is the interesting, curious, and for some unbelievable aspect? It is that the spirit world feels these repercussions, feels the repercussions of our turmoil, of our crisis on earth. It's like a ripple effect. And we can easily imagine it, because if we throw a pebble into a calm pool or body of water in general, we see how this pebble or this rock creates effects, ripple effects, literally. So, of course, if Earth is being rocked, it would ripple out to other planets, and it would ripple out to the discarnates. So the spirit world plays an active part in our turmoil. Very interesting, but not altogether surprising. This should come as no surprise, he says, to those who know that spirits make up part of humanity. We know that there's more spirits, discarnates, than incarnate spirits, and that we are surrounded by discarnates. There is not much empty space. There's spirits everywhere that cohabitate with us, that influence us, that live sometimes vicariously through our passions. That they come from humankind and must return to it. This should come as no surprise, he says, to those who know that spirits make up part of humanity, and to those that they come from humankind and must return to it. Because spirits are just like us, without a physical, dense body. So it's not surprising. Consequently, it is natural that they would have an interest in the movements that occur among human beings, right? Yeah, of course, because many of them are less evolved than we are. Many are like as much evolved as we are. Some are more evolved than we are, but they're still curious about planet Earth at that level of their evolution. You can be sure, therefore, that when a social revolution occurs on the Earth, it also impacts the invisible worlds. All the good and evil passions become overexcited. They are just as they do amongst you. And that is something we need to guard ourselves against. That our evil passions stay in check. We know from Allan Kardec, he asked the question about the passions to the spirits on high, and the spirits educated us beautifully, saying that passions are actually neither bad nor good, but it depends what we do with them. So there's the lower passions that keep us eating and drinking, that get us overexcited, that create, like a wild horse, some destruction. And then there is those passions that are more educated via our will, which needs to be educated, Emmanuel says, in thought and life, and those inside us to do the good, to stay focused, to be aligned with God's will. So now we're learning that the spirit world feels the repercussions of our turmoil, and that the spirit world plays an active part in this turmoil. Any social revolution on Earth impacts the invisible world. Good and evil passions become overexcited, both among us, incarnates as well as discarnates. So it also shows us the responsibility we carry, because our emotions, our thoughts impact more than just our family members and friends, co-workers. It goes much further. Then he says, since everything in nature is linked together, to the disturbances of incarnates and discarnates, sometimes are added the disturbances of the physical elements. So there's also physical elements on the Earth, like natural catastrophes, for example, that now also are being influenced. We have to imagine that everything's connected. Nothing is separate. So anything that rocks the boat is going to rock the ocean, so to speak. So it's very important for us to see how far-reaching our crises, our turmoil, and of course also our happy times are. There's a lot of impact we're causing. And this is the piece that we carry from Dr. Berry, most and foremost. So thank you, Dr. Berry. We enjoyed that very much. Now let us move on back to Allan Kardec. And this is item 10 now, on page 418, if you like to move along. From the preceding, one may conclude that as a result of their orbital movement through space, heavenly bodies exert a lesser or greater influence on one another, depending on their proximity and their respective position. So we just learned that everything is connected, that we impact each other, both from spirit to spirit, but even from planet to planet. But here now we're learning that it also depends on how far the spirits and the planets, the heavenly bodies are from each other. So of course, the closer and the more intimately we live together, spirits sharing our home and all that, of course there is more repercussion than if it's further removed. So this is an additional important aspect to consider. If through the linkage and solidarity of causes and effects, the periods of humankind's moral renewals coincide with the physical revolutions of the globe, such periods may be accompanied or preceded by natural phenomena that are unusual to those who are not familiar with them, by, for example, meteors that seem strange, or by an unusual intensity of destructive calamities. So as we just heard, there is a huge ripple effect of what's happening here on Earth. And it depends a little bit on the proximity or distance the other heavenly bodies have from us, and also the spirits have from us, the discarnate spirits have from us. But it is through this linkage, and this linkage is based on causes and effects, that those moments of turmoil here on planet Earth, for example, also accompany natural phenomena. And these so-called natural phenomena might be meteors. Now, we know that we had lots of meteor showers in the last few years, lots of them. It appeared to be more. I'm not an astronomer, astrologer, or anything like that, but it certainly appeared to be more than ever. So here we hear that that's not anything supernatural. This actually is part and parcel of these crises that Earth goes through. And also destructive calamities. Yes, we had these incredible wildfires in California and other parts of the world. And then we had other disasters and earthquakes that happened. We can attest to that as well. These calamities are neither a cause, he says, are neither a cause nor supernatural omens, but a consequence of the general movement occurring in both the physical and moral world. So if everything is in movement, it does have an impact on the natural physical revolutions, the physical aspects of the planet. And that is based on the law of cause and effect, because we're all linked and connected. So this is another very interesting aspect to consider. By foretelling the age of renewal that will open up for humankind and mark the end of the world, the old world, Jesus was able to say that it would be characterized by extraordinary movements, earthquakes, various calamities, and signs in the sky, which are nothing more than meteors, without derogating from the laws of nature. The uneducated common folk, however, saw in these words the announcement of miraculous events. And now, Alan Kardec just explained to us its law of cause and effect. So if everything is rocking and moving here, it has a ripple effect in all different spheres and arenas. So there's nothing supernatural about it. It falls under the law of nature. It can be explained. So let us see. I'm going to see whether there's John. Hi, dear friend. Thanks for joining. Just checking real quick. And Tony. Hi, Tony. Thanks for joining, dear friend. Linda Donnell and Elisa Rodriguez and Teresa. Hi, Teresa. Nice to see you here. And W.H. Smith. Thank you so much. And Nora Brazil, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining. Just want to make sure that there was no questions so far. But please feel free to post comments or questions if you like. So now let us move on to item 11. Foreseeing the progressive movements of humankind holds nothing surprising for dematerialized beings who can see the objective towards which all things are headed, some of whom even possess God's direct thought, and who discern in partial movements the time in which a general movement can occur, just as one can determine beforehand the time needed for a tree to bear fruit, or as astronomers can calculate the timing of an astronomical phenomena by the time it takes for a heavenly body to complete its orbit. Whoa, this was a long run-on sentence, which let's take it apart. It's actually not so complicated. Essentially, we might jog our memory to chapter 16 in Genesis. A few weeks ago, we studied the theory of foreknowledge. And there, right at the beginning, Alan Kardec introduced us to the concept that the higher a spirit is, but a spirit more on high, is like a traveler on top of a high mountain. And that traveler can see much further than you and I can. We are down in the thorn bushes and the brambles, just chucking along, not knowing where we're going very often, and hopefully not despairing, but thank God we know better. We know Spiritism, and we study, and we know that everything has its rightness and is only for our own good. But these travelers, they see where we're going. They have a much wider ranging view. And that's also why we learned that there is really no future, because everything is happening at the same time as quantum physics teaches us as well. So this little paragraph is actually referring to this. It says that foreseeing the progressive movements of humankind holds nothing surprising for dematerialized beings, which are discarnates, and the more highly evolved they are, he says they are even possessing God's direct thought. So they know what's down the road from our perspective. So to speak, from our perspective in the future, but it's not in the future from their perspective. So it is not foresight of progressive movements of humankind is not surprising for the discarnates because they can see it. And he just, refers to an example of, we know approximately when a tree bears fruit because we have the seasons and we know which tree bears fruit when and in which climactic zone it lives. So it's just like that. And the other example he mentions was the astronomical phenomena that can also be forecasted because of mathematical calculations of how fast one planet moves around the other and so forth. And this is kind of like spirits, dematerialized spirits, discarnates can do it as well. So let us move on to item 12. Humankind is a collective being in which the same moral revolutions occur in each individual being, with the difference that some occur from year to year, others from century to century. So we humans are a collective being, but we're also individualities. So the same moral revolutions occur in the collective as well as in the individual. The difference is that some moral revolutions occur yearly and some moral revolutions occur from century to century. So it's both that's happening, right? We are going through a worldwide shift because we're all impacted worldwide by the same illness and the consequences from that. And yet it's also different for each and every single one of us. So the whole planet, so the humankind as a collective being is transmuting and growing or purifying, let's use that word hopefully, and also we individually do. Now, let's move on to item. These are short items, so now we're moving into a little bit longer one. So this is now item 13. We're still part of the same chapter, chapter 18, the time has come. As we have stated, the forward progress of humankind occurs in two ways. in two ways. One is gradual, slow, and imperceptible. If one considers consecutive eras that result in successive improvements in customs, laws, and usages, and which cannot be perceived except over time, such as the changes that water currents bring to the surface of the globe. So part of us and part of mankind progresses gradually and imperceptibly. Sometimes we can't even tell. Right? From one day to the next, it's just hard to tell that we've shifted very often, but we do. And the other one is marked by relatively abrupt, quick movements, similar to those of a torrent breaking the dikes, and which in a few years over the space that would have otherwise taken centuries. And those were wars, and probably what we're going through right now may fall into this category too, because we are evolving faster. It's kind of like the screws are on us and we're being pushed to make shifts. So one is gradual, the other one is quick. And then there is also the moral cataclysms, he says, that in a few moments swallows up the institutions of the past and is succeeded by a new order of things that stabilizes little by little as peace is definitely restored. So the moral cataclysms, that's when past institutions disappear, they get swallowed up, and new order of things appears. So I'm sure you will attest that we're in the middle of these processes right now. Both there's some gradual imperceptible ones, also sometimes feels rather abrupt and quick right now, and we're also in a moral cataclysm. So very exciting to kind of read about and learn about and study this a little bit more. And of course, you're welcome, because we're not reading every single word. There's a little bit more to the chapters, which is picking out the highlights. It is kind of confirming. It's kind of consoling almost to study where we feel this is really happening right now, right? So those who live long enough to stand on both sides of the new phase will think that a new world has arisen from the ruins of the old. The character, customs, and usages, everything has changed. Actually, what has occurred is that new humans, or rather regenerated ones, have appeared. The ideas of the generation that has passed away have given way to the new ideas of the generation that has arisen. This planet is in the transition from a planet of atonement, trials, and tribulations to a planet of regeneration, and we're right in the middle of it. Or maybe we're more at the beginning of the middle. I don't know, but we're in it right now. So it's overall a good thing. Hopefully we can keep our alignment to the light, to God, to God's will in the process. Always looking for fraternity and charity. Benevolence is the key, right, friends? Item 14. Having reached adulthood, humankind will have new needs and greater and higher aspirations. So we've reached adulthood. We will have, as a result, new needs and greater and higher aspirations. It will understand the emptiness of the ideas in which it had been cradled and the inability of its institutions to bring happiness. It will no longer find in the current state of affairs the true satisfaction to which it feels it has been called. Consequently, it will rid itself of its childish ways, and driven by an irresistible force, will launch itself towards unknown shores in search of new, less limited horizons. There's so much promise in that. And yet, at the same time, we're swimming in it, right? We have our oars in our hands. We're looking for those new shores as we go through the different ups and downs, sometimes daily, right? So we've reached adulthood. And as a result of that, we are no longer in adolescence. And when we remember when we were in adolescence and now we're in adulthood, and of course there's different phases in adulthood, but it's vastly different from the desires and needs and what we crave and what we do to when we are more mature. And that sometimes takes a while and sometimes takes pain to actually break through the old phase, right? And so it's only understandable that that's what we're going through. And what brought us happiness in the past doesn't hold true any longer. And so the satisfaction that we crave are different. And our childish ways will fall off. And there is many that we need to shed, right? Blaming and shaming is one of them. Just many of many, one of many. And so it's like an irresistible force, he says, that drives us to less limited horizons. Wow, nice, huh? Yes, it is at one of these periods of transformation, or if you prefer, of moral growth, that humankind has arrived. So we have arrived at a new port, and that is called moral growth. So he says, if you prefer to call it, instead of periods of transformation, of moral growth. And humankind has arrived there. That's why. And we're moving on. This is not the final one. This is just the transition from adolescence to adulthood. The past is no longer sufficient for its new aspiration, its new necessities. And that is why everything is shifting. Globally and individually, we're all realigning in a new way. It is in the moment in which humankind finds itself too confined within its material sphere, where intellectual life overflows and where the sentiment of spirituality blooms, that the individuals who call themselves philosophers hope to fill the vacuum with doctrines of nihilism and materialism. Of course, as an aside, this book was written 150, 160 years ago. We still have nihilism and materialism, but in Europe, the beginning of the 20th century, particularly in Germany, nihilism was blooming. It was a major movement. I can even attest to the fact my father was very philosophically inclined. He was a nihilist. He was riding the wave of that fashion movement. So that's maybe why Allan Kardec is referring to that. But one thing is clear, that if humankind finds itself confined in its material sphere, where the intellectual life overflows, but also there is sentiments of spirituality blooming, that there's an opening for philosophers to come in. And at the time, it was nihilism and materialism that they filled the gaps with. And then what happens? What does that lead to? Allan Kardec calls it a strange aberration. These same individuals claim to be driving humankind forward, yet they make every effort to contain it in the narrow circles of matter, from which it aspires to escape. We are moving, we are here to dematerialize ourselves, right? Through our many, 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 many incarnations, we are ascending towards God. That means we're leaving behind more and more the dense, more and more dense matter. And that's not only within planet Earth, but even then when we graduate to more evolved worlds, our physical body, for example, will be different, less dense. So our general movement, progress, is away from matter. Now, these philosophers at the time that Allan Kardec wrote this book took over, and they pushed nihilism and materialism, which are linked, because the nihilists believe there's nothing after death. Actually, our lives doesn't lead to anything. Nihilism means nothingness. Nihil comes from Latin. It's nothingness. To believe in nothingness. That's very depressing. That's very materialistic, right? It all ends with matter. Matter is everything. So these individuals were actually driving humankind. They thought they were forward oriented and progressive, and that's why so many jumped on the bandwagon at the time and went with it, maybe even to this day. But they were actually regressive because they kept mankind anchored in materialism, in matter. So we know that we on earth are not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes. And that belongs to all spheres of life. We know it to be true that our laws keep changing because we are perfecting ourselves. We know that philosophers change because they learn more and become more evolved. We know that even science changes. DDT in the 40s, kids were sprayed down with DDT, and it was in the name of saving lives, and there was a mistake. Or, for example, there was an era, a friend of mine received a polio vaccine, which was the live virus in the 50s for a while. It was a mistake. Kids got sick. She's to this day suffering from a severe disability as a result of contracting polio from this live virus vaccination. I know I got a polio vaccination. It wasn't a live virus anymore, but science caught on and learned new lessons from mistakes. So we're all in evolution. It's all fluidic. And it's interesting to hear Alan Kardec speak about that in this way. He says these individuals bar mankind from the aspect of infinite life, and pointing at the grave tell it, ne plus ultra. Plus ultra. It says nec plus ultra, which is really French, but the English version is ne plus ultra. What does it mean? It's really Latin. It means the highest point capable of being attained. So in other words, they're pointing at the grave saying, you've done it. That's as far as you're getting. Or they say the most profound quality of your state. So this is it. It all ends in ashes, that our body decomposes. That is nihilism and materialism in a nutshell, right? So let us see. Any questions and comments, friends? All right, we're moving on. Item 15. Those who have meditated on Spiritism and its consequences and have not restricted it to the sphere of producing a few phenomena understand that it opens up a new pathway to humankind and discloses the horizons of the infinite. So Spiritism comes along, and Alan Kardec, who wrote this book, and says, this is all different. It opens everything up, and how beautiful is that? Now we understand where we're coming from, what the purpose of our existence is, and where we're going. And it all has its order. Humans no longer walk in blindness. They know where they have come from, where they are going, and why they are on the earth. That's exactly what we just said. In their previous lives, humans find the reason for what they are today. And from what they make of themselves today, they can deduce what they will be tomorrow. So this stands in stark contrast to materialism and nihilism. So we're no longer walking in blindness, thanks to Spiritism and, of course, some other teachings, but we're talking about Spiritism right now. Humans find reason for who they are today and in previous lives. And we can deduce what we will be tomorrow from what we make of ourselves today. As we always say, every thought, every feeling plants a seed in our garden of immortality. And, of course, the planting is we use our free will for, but the harvest is compulsory. We have to reap the fruits of the seeds we planted. Right. Item 16. Under the domain of the denial that the individual has a future, everything necessarily shrinks to the petty proportions of the moment and the personality. So now Alan Kardec loops back into the belief, into the materialism, when we deny that the individual has a future, because ne plus ultra, meaning the grave is like it. Now we've reached our goal. Spiritism stands in contrast to that. So under the domain of the denial that the individual has a future, everything necessarily shrinks to the petty proportions of the moment. Well, we also read about that and study that in the gospel. That is when we focus only on materialism and only on this lifetime, our perspective becomes very myopic. And then we start becoming rebellious because we don't understand why we're going through hardship, why this, that, or the other person is in our lives, because all we see is this moment, is this lifetime. Yes, this moment is important because, as we just learned, it will determine how we live. This moment will determine our future. But there is a future, at least from our perspective. We know that from the perspective of the higher spirits, it's already happened. But we understand, right? On the other hand, however, what breadth does the certainty that the spiritual being will live forever give to human thought? When we know that our soul is immortal, everything changes. All of a sudden, everything makes sense. What could be more just and more consoling than the idea of the same individuals progressing incessantly? First, by being born through generations on the same world, and then on world after world, without dissolution of continuity until they reach perfection. What could be more just and consoling? It just all of a sudden, finally, all makes sense, doesn't it? It is extremely consoling. And Jesus taught us too. We're continuously progressing, incessantly progressing from lifetime to lifetime, from planet to planet. Then all our actions have a purpose. All humans' actions have a purpose. For while they're working for the whole, they're working for themselves and for each other in a way that neither individual nor general progress is ever fruitless. So now we even have the aspect of fraternity come in, because it's not just for us in this moment. Whatever we do for ourselves, we're actually doing for mankind in general. We're always, by us shifting, just that alone, which is huge, of course, we help others, either as models or because now we have different responses to stimuli that come our way. And there's so many different forms and shapes. It is wonderful. We are all working together in sync, like all these little wheels in a machine. So, but before being born through generations on the same world and then on different worlds, and through this incessant continuity, we work towards, we attain ultimately perfection. We draw closer to God. Everything has order. Everything is perfect because God is all perfect. So now let us move to item 17. Now we're switching gears a little bit and we're going to talk about something so important. And I hope you're still alive on the other end and you're still paying attention. I know it's a lot of information that we're bringing to you, but fraternity. Allan Kardec is now touching on fraternity, which is just so important. And he will explain to us a little bit more in detail of what that means. Fraternity must be the cornerstone of the new social order. Wow. So right in this sentence, hopefully we're taking note, or if you want to take an image of this slide, fraternity must be the cornerstone of the new social order. We always talk about the new social order or the new world order, whatever we want to coin it. Allan Kardec helps us with the cornerstone, which is the most important aspect, and that is fraternity. How helpful is that? Fraternity must be the cornerstone of the new social order. And now he defines it for us. There can be no true, solid, and effective fraternity unless it rests upon an unshakable foundation. So true fraternity, solid fraternity, effective fraternity needs to rest upon an unshakable foundation. And now we're going to ask, what is that? What is that unshakable foundation that true, solid, and effective fraternity must rest on? It is faith. And now he's going to explain faith more for us. Because, of course, faith isn't faith, right? There's blind faith and there's reasoned faith. And we know that in Spiritism, we are aligned with reasoned faith and not with blind faith. So he says, not faith in these or those particular dogmas, which change with the times and peoples who cast stones at one another, because by anathematizing one another, they feel hostility, but faith in the fundamental principles that everyone can accept. All right, so this is really important. So fraternity must be the cornerstone of our new social order. So this is where our work lies, fraternity. We need to learn about fraternity and practice fraternity. True fraternity rests on an unshakable foundation, which is faith. Now, it's not the faith in dogmas. And there's dogmas in all aspects of life. In all. There can be educational dogmas. There can be medical dogmas. There can be legal dogmas. There can be religious dogmas. Anything can become dogmatic. So not faith in dogmas. Why? Because dogmas change with time and peoples. Because we evolve. Our laws evolve. Everything changes because we're not super evolved human beings yet. We're learning. We need to be humble. So not faith in dogmas, because they change with time and peoples. But what kind of faith? Faith that everyone can accept. Now, what faith in what can everyone accept? And here it is now. Alan Kardec's just so wonderful how he defines it for us. So we are asked to have faith in God. We can all agree on that. Faith in God. Faith in the soul. The soul exists. Soul is immortal. Faith in the future. Faith in the future, that there is a future, that there is more to us. It doesn't stop at the grave, like in nihilism, materialism. Faith on the ongoing progress of individuals. Law of progress. Faith in the law of progress. Everything is progressing. We're not at a standstill. We haven't reached it yet, whatever it is. No, we're movement. We're in progress. Ongoing progress of individuals. And that's not just incarnates. It's also discarnates. Everything is changing, is growing, is progressing. That's the word. Everything is progressing. And lastly, faith in the perpetuity of relationships among individuals, among us. The perpetuity of relationships among individuals. Law of society would be a really good companion study. We are born to live with others. Why? Because we learn from others and we offer service to others. Earlier, we spoke in item 9 and 10 about how everything is connected. Everything is affected by one thing or the other. So relationships, to live in society, to live in collaboration and cooperation with others is vital. And that's what we need to, and he says, now this is the faith. So it starts with fraternity. Fraternity is the cornerstone of the new social order. Here's the slide again. Fraternity is the cornerstone of the new social order. True fraternity rests on an unshakable foundation, which is faith, reasoned faith. But not the faith in dogmas, which changes with people and times, but the faith in fundamental principles that we all can agree on. That's where fraternity, because now we agree. We don't want to, dogmas split us apart, but faith in fundamental principles that we can all agree on, we come together. That's where fraternity comes into fruition. And that is God, the soul, the future, the ongoing progress of individuals, and the perpetuity of relationships among individuals. And that is the faith that Spiritism provides. He continues, when all people are convinced that God is the same for all, that this supremely just and good God cannot want anything unjust, that evil comes from humans and not from God, then they will regard one another as children of the same Father and will shake hands with one another. So he explains to us what God stands for. This is the faith that Spiritism provides. This is the faith that Spiritism provides. It's nice to know, isn't it? It's nice to know that fraternity is the cornerstone of the new era social order. It is good to know that fraternity is resting on faith, and how the faith that Spiritism provides looks like. Let us move on to item, this was item 17, item 18, even though this is 19. Okay. The intellectual progress accomplished so far in vast proportions is a huge step and has marked the first phase of humankind. So intellect, as we learned in the Spirit's book, often comes before the moral evolution. But they're equally important. Those are the two wings of a bird. They have to be equally strong for a bird to fly and ascend to God. By itself, however, it has been powerless to regenerate it. Hello, friends. We are back for a moment there. We fell off the deep end. So let us share one more time real quick. Share screen. And yeah, Tony, I think it's working again. Looks like it. All right, so let us continue. All right. We're continuing. So intelligence is not the winner alone. We need more. As long as humans are dominated by pride and selfishness, they will use their intelligence and knowledge to satisfy their passions and personal interests, which is why they apply themselves to perfecting ways of harming and destroying their neighbor. So intelligence alone keeps us in our selfishness and pride. We need love. We need service, the wing of love, the wing of service, the wing of charity, the wing of humility. in order to break with our habit of getting stuck in selfishness and pride, because then we harm our neighbors, then we destroy our neighbors, then we're not aligned with good. Only moral progress can assure people happiness on earth by restraining evil passions. Only moral progress can assure people happiness on earth by restraining evil passions. Passions are like wild horses. If they're not educated, if they're not reined in, bridled like a horse, they cause destructions. And we're talking about the lower passions. Drugs, materialism, food, anything that we overindulge in. That is a passion that's not bridled. Like a wild horse causes destruction. But when we use our passions to do the good, that's when we are in business. Then we're aligned with God's will. So what he's saying here is only moral progress can assure people happiness on earth by restraining our evil passions. It alone can enable harmony, peace, and fraternity to reign. And we just heard in item 17, fraternity is the cornerstone of the new social order. So for that to be manifested, we need to work on our moral transformation to get away from selfishness and pride. Moral progress will break down the barriers that separate people and will bring down class prejudices and silence the antagonism between sects, teaching people to regard one another as brothers and sisters who are called to mutually help one another and not live at one another's expense. He's further helping us to understand fraternity, which is anchored in our moral progress. We know that it's based on faith. Reason faith, the way we explained it a minute ago. Moral progress is part and parcel of this, of establishing and practicing fraternity on earth. Because if we're selfish and prideful, we're stuck in this, in our own selves, and we do harm. So in order to be truly fraternal and stop living at one another's expense, but to help each other, to be charitable, to be fraternal, we need to stop being selfish and prideful. We need to be humble. Moreover, it is moral progress aided by the progress of intelligence that will join people together in one and the same belief, founded on inarguable eternal truths and consequently acceptable to all. So our moral progress is aided by our intelligence. Again, Emmanuel in Thought and Life speaks of the two wings, the wing of knowledge, which is linked to our intelligence, and the wing of love, which is fraternity, which is charity, which is humility, all of this. And he says that these two wings need to be equally strong, developed, and practiced in order to ascend to God. Because we know a bird with only one wing cannot ascend, cannot fly. Unity of belief will be the most powerful bond, the most solid foundation of universal fraternity. That is the time to come. This is what we're working on. This is what we're working on. Unity of belief will be the most powerful bond, the most solid foundation of universal fraternity, which has been shattered throughout history by the religious hostilities that have divided peoples and families, making them see dissidents as enemies to be avoided, fought against and exterminated instead of brothers and sisters to be loved. And we may add many other spheres of our social life other than religions. Politics, right? And so many other spheres where we have come apart. Fraternity down the drain. We forget about it because we're caught in our dogmas, in our dogmatic thinking that we are right and you're wrong. And consequently, we fight our brothers and sisters. We look for exterminating them instead of loving our brothers and sisters, instead of finding this commonology this fraternity, by looking for what we can agree on, and Alan Kardec said, which is what faith is based on. Moral progress, aided by intelligence, will join people together in one and the same belief, founded on inarguable eternal truths, which will be acceptable to all. Dear friends, let us pause here. It is late. We've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully, we've learned a lot. Let us stop sharing here and let us say hello. Let us say hello. Hi, Kristen. Dear friend, thank you for joining. Thank you, Robbie, for joining. Thank you, dear friends, for joining. It's been a pleasure. It's so exciting. Next week, we will continue with another part, with the final aspect of this chapter. Unfortunately, we weren't able to finish it. And then we're moving into the next generation. And then we will be complete. It will be just one more time that we're spending on Genesis. We thank God. We thank the good spirits. We thank Jesus. We thank Allan Kardec and all the spirits, both incarnate as well as discarnate, collaborating on this beautiful information that we were showered with right now, which we were gifted with. We are filled with gratitude for receiving such wonderful guidance, consoling information, helping us to navigate our incarnation better and these pivotal times in a more aligned, conscious way. We will be dedicated to our moral transformation and to accumulating more knowledge, which will help us understand each other. And we will be practicing fraternity, focusing on fraternity as the cornerstone of the new social order. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Many blessings. God bless you. And so, God willing, we will see you again next week, same time, same place. Love you.